I was born a professional procrastinator. You know how they say the early bird gets the worm? Well, I ain't never had an affinity for worms. Or early mornings, for that matter. I moseyed into the world at an unhurried, yet respectable 5 p.m. I guess you could say my birth story was a foreshadow, since 5 p.m. is still my power hour. I've always joked that I do my best work under immense pressure, and for a long time, that was true. If you don't believe me, I've got the Facebook memories that serve as a yearly reminder of the assignment roulette I played throughout college. Producing stellar work at the final hour was my superpower, and I wore it like a badge of honor. Till it wore me out. My superpower, procrastination, had grown up, turned into avoidance, and started hanging out with the wrong crowd. You know the one: distractibility, impulsiveness, forgetfulness. For the first time in my life, I was underachieving, and worse, I was labeled as lazy. While others chanted, eat, sleep, work, repeat, mine sounded more like, I got distracted. Wait, did I eat? I was overwhelmed, I felt like a failure, and I was ashamed. Can anyone relate?
Yes.
If so, lock in, because you're right where you need to be. This hot mess turned professional perspective coach is going to turn what you thought you knew about getting your life together on its head. And it all boils down to one word: P.R.I.M.E. Now, before y'all go jumping to conclusions about my impulse spending habits, we'll save that conversation for another day. You are right. But also, P.R.I.M.E. is more than an acronym. P.R.I.M.E. today stands for Progress is Realized when Intention Meets Execution. And it's more than an acronym. It's a call to action. One that says that we need to lean into our natural tendencies and turn our shortcomings into our greatest assets. Now, since I'm standing here on this red dot in all my neurodivergent glory, you should know I use acronyms and analogies as a means of expressing myself and simplifying complex ideas. I didn't always know I was neurodivergent, though. You see, for years, I tried and succeeded at masking my challenges. On the surface, I looked calm, cool, collected, self-assured even, but underneath, I was on the verge of unraveling. Imagine being a part of a choir where the voices are meant to blend into a beautiful harmony, but there's this one voice that's slightly off. To the untrained ear, it sounds great, but if you listen closely, there is a slight tension, like something wobbling between pitches, stuck between not enough and too much. That was me. I was struggling to find my place, trying to find that harmony where my inner rhythm matched the world around me. But something seemed off, like I couldn't quite find my place, and it left me desperate to find that perfect pitch. My self-confidence was shot. And I was messing up things that I used to be able to do in my sleep. And while we're on the subject of sleep, I wasn't getting any. And it was during one of those sleepless nights that I realized something has to give. So I saw my doctor. I word vomited all over the room. And when I was done, I took a deep, steadying breath and said, so yeah, I think I'm depressed. After answering several more questions, I learned that avoidance and her band of misfits had a name: ADHD. Now, as surprising as it was, in a lot of ways, it was refreshing to know that I wasn't lazy and I wasn't an underachiever. I'll be honest, I left that appointment skipping like my name was Dorothy and that prescription were the sparkly shoes that were gonna get me back to Kansas. I just knew it was done. I was good now. Something I don't think they stress enough about medication is that it works best if you remember to take it. Yeah. So yeah, I made some progress. But as I climbed the corporate ladder, it became increasingly difficult to do what seemed to come naturally to those around me. My calendar looked like a losing game of Tetris, with meetings and tasks stacked one over top of the other, just overlapping. And don't even get me started on the full collection of barely used planners, long forgotten to-do lists, and illegible sticky notes. What was I even trying to say? And this is where a well-timed observation from a trusted advisor changed the game. She said, Tristan, you talk about your value of agency a lot, how you are powerful and confident in your ability to influence the direction of your life. Yeah, you don't even use any agency in your own calendar. Whoa. Sticky note to self. Maybe your enemies are too close. But like I said, y'all, this was a trusted advisor. So after I finished punching the air, I recovered, I reflected, and I sought my agency. I chose P.R.I.M.E because it has many definitions, all rooted in a common theme. They all describe something that at its highest value, at its most valuable, and operating at its intended purpose. Transparently, for a long time, I thought P.R.I.M.E was something to strive towards, and I used it as a mantra, something to help me stay focused so that I could win. It wasn't until later that I realized that the beauty in P.R.I.M.E wasn't that it described something that was the best, but something operating at its best. So if I'm in my prime, then I'm operating at my best. That subtle difference between the best and my best was fundamental. When I think of myself as the best, it automatically introduces external factors. Those external factors prioritize position, and they really drive in this idea that my value fluctuates depending on who I'm near. On the other hand, when I think of my best, the focus becomes internal, singular, personal, only considering if I'm operating at my best. So today I think of P.R.I.M.E as an algorithm. It's a set of rules to help me navigate my life. If you're like me and you need a good visual, it looks like this in my head. Now listen, y'all know I've probably heard of girl math, toddler math even. Well, let me introduce you to Tristan math. And what that means is I'm about to make it make sense without using one iota of actual math. So what we want to do is first get rooted in the elements, and then we'll do some plug and play. You probably already know that progress means movement towards a destination. Intention is simply a plan, and execution is seeing that plan through fully. But by a show of hands, how many of you all have ever decided to do something, made what you thought was a foolproof plan, and didn't deliver? Me too. I realized that there was a fundamental flaw in my initial P.R.I.M.E logic. I was operating under the assumption that there was a natural flow from intention to execution, making progress basically guaranteed. I now know that the more accurate depiction of P.R.I.M.E is something like this. And this is the secret sauce of P.R.I.M.E, the X factor. Everybody has an X factor. It's that thing that lives in the gap between intention and execution, and it shapes how you get things done. It's not inherently positive or negative, but it can either amplify or dampen your ability to make progress. For me, the X factor is ADHD. But it can be anything that influences your ability to execute. At its core, the P.R.I.M.E mindset calls us to immerse ourselves in our X factors. It calls us to really think about what they are and how they're influencing our progress. But this is not just for awareness. It's so that we can acknowledge them, so that we can plan for them, and most importantly, so we can harness them. So if you're wondering how do we do this practically, I want to show you. And since I've already shared so much and we real deep into my business today, I'll use myself as an example. Before P.R.I.M.E, this is what my calendar looked like. Just a mass of meetings, one on top of the other with very little breaks in between. And when you add ADHD to the mix, this was a recipe for burnout and overwhelm. So I decided to use P.R.I.M.E and take back my agency in my calendar. How did I do it? Well, first I took an inventory of the type of events that were on my calendar. And then I color-coded them based on how much energy they took from me, or how their level of complexity, the higher or the lower stakes events. I created a key of some sort. Red were high-stakes conversations where my presence, participation, and my expertise were critical to the outcome. Blue were deep focus moments where I needed to come up with a tangible asset by the time I was done. Green were for conversations or meetings where my presence was necessary, but not necessarily my expertise. So if I'm watching a pre-recorded video, a TED Talk, if you will. Gray were for one-to-one, low-stakes conversations with internal team members or partners. And yellow, my favorite, were energizing opportunities and things that fostered my well-being, such as eating. It created something like a heat map that really gave me a bird's eye view of how I was spending my energy, but more importantly, helped me understand when my X factor was being a disruptor. Now, today, this is what my calendar looks like. What I decided to do was, when I saw certain color combinations, if you will, that led to a more or less effective day, I made adjustments, I learned from it, and I moved forward. So as you can see, I put a yellow block after each of the high stakes types of events. So those blue and those reds, they usually left me drained, making it very difficult to focus on other things right after, right? So I put a yellow block there, and what it does is it helps to re-energize my social and emotional battery so that I can show up my best. I also realized that as fantastic as I am, and I am, I can only do so much, and I can only be as fantastic as my energy will allow me to be. So I started to realize that I needed to do, say it with me, y'all, boundaries. Boundaries. I needed to create boundaries around how many high-stakes events I had in one day. This made it so that I could show up to whatever type of event the best at, my prime, if you will. Of course, even with all of this consideration, some days are going to be on fire. I can't control all the variables. I only know my X factors. Those days when things are on fire, I grab myself a marshmallow and make a s'more because I probably got distracted and forgot to eat. I now know that my X factor, ADHD, is not inherently a blocker, particularly when I work with it as opposed to trying to work around it or ignoring it altogether. If you're wondering, I am still a professional procrastinator. But I don't say that in a self-deprecating way, because I also know that if my intentions are clear and my actions are deliberate, progress is not only attainable, it's inevitable. So I'll leave you with this. American writer, poet, and activist Alice Walker once said, "The most common way people give up their power is by assuming they don't have any." And in a world where one-size-fits-all solutions just don't work, the prime mindset makes you the main factor. So if by now you're asking yourself, what are my X factors? That's right where you need to be. I know for a fact I'm in my prime because I know my X factors. And my question is, are you? Thank you.